managed service providers, certainly the network security space, are typically considered pretty expensive. Mm-hmm. I think the first challenge we would get is, well, I can potentially build this for cheaper. And I think what we're saying here is, are we comparing apples for apples when we make that pricing or affordability comparison? Are we taking into account value? What are some of the hard to measure savings when using a managed service provider or a company like Cloud Gateway, whether it be in the networking space or outside, mm-hmm. that perhaps go unnoticed or not recognised?
Yeah, I think it really depends on who's the one kind of looking at that spreadsheet and looking at those numbers and looking at those line items. You know, I'd expect a fairly seasoned commercial person or, you know, sort of chief financial officer to know this kind of stuff. But often I think decisions are heavily influenced by, you know, technical teams themselves. I think for me it's the kind of the more obvious ones why managed service providers exist is in a market where we know that there are skill shortages, and that's not just networking. We've established that is across the sort of greatest spectrum of information technology. Your service provider has an economy of scale. They have more people than they need for your account because they're servicing multiple accounts, which means that they'll always have a pool of people and they can keep up with that kind of thing. The problem that you've got that is often maybe not considered when company X decides that they're going to build an internal team, I think we touched on it a little bit about like the product earlier, is how am I going to maintain these skills? How am I going to keep these people here? How am I going to stop them from leaving? And what happens when they do? What happens when we have to go to rehiring? What does that gap look like as a risk to our business when someone's not here? What does rehiring look like? What is the cost to the business for the rehiring? That has a time-based cost to it, as well as the kind of salary-based cost and things like that. But depending on the size of that team and the thing that they're managing, building, whether it's a service they're building or an actual product, does this disruption prevent you from getting something to market? And what is ultimately that cost to your business? Do you want that continued kind of consistent stability from what a service provider should be able to offer you, certainly from a personnel perspective? Or are you prepared to take that risk where, things, if you've got a small team, you're talking sort of 8, 9, 10 people, you suddenly lose 1 or 2, that's, you're talking 20, 30% of your team's just gone. If you can't launch something and get something to market, or you can't fix something, what's that going to do for you? What does that mean to your business? Does it mean that there's a major loss of revenue? Or if you're working in the public sector, does it mean something that you think is going to, radically affect positively citizens' lives, be it in justice or health, whatever it might be, and having that sit on the shelf for another 6 months, what does that actually, reflect to? What does it mean? What's the measurable here? Is it lives? Is that, in the public sector it often is. So I think it's always the sort of, it's the hiddens, the unknowns. It's easy to cost, when it is apples for apples, they're easy. I can see cost on the left is X, cost on the right is 2X or half X, whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's always that kind of unknown, can be unquantifiable. What us losing our, I'm going to take that private sector approach, us losing 3 to 6 months launching a product, if my competitor gets there first, have I just lost the entire market? Could it even go as far as sinking my company? I don't know. So I think they're the real costs. They're the hidden costs. They're the ones that I think someone, like I say, who's really established, who knows how to do these things, who is used to kind of factoring those in, they're the ones that need to be considered.
So another thing we hear when it comes to managed service providers, perhaps versus building something in-house, is I guess this perception as a lack of control, or you're giving up control. And I know we have some methods and tactics in place to ensure and reassure our customers that that's not the case. Is that a fair challenge from your perspective and in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair challenge, I think, from, say, the purchasing entity, the company who buys the service. I think managed service providers have traditionally provided a service, but know that, of course, that is what their business is, so they don't want to lose it. Well, one of the best ways not to lose it is ensure that someone doesn't have the ability to take it. And let's not dance around our handbags on this one. The behaviours of major service providers, and I know this because I worked in one for many, many years, is to make it as difficult as possible for your customers to change, to adapt, to evolve, to move to another service provider, or to take it in-house. I'm not saying that these things are completely nefarious, but they are not necessarily the best practices for the customer. I think data has historically been hidden from the customer or not easily offered up. That actually doesn't matter. So, being able to look at your security logs or being able to see some routes on a network, that should just be offered up as basic. But I think what's happened and is happening is that this world is evolving. The world of managed service provision is evolving and changing, and it has to be a hybrid approach. And that hybrid approach isn't 50-50. It could be 90-10, it could be 10-90. Some companies want to be able to touch and configure and do quite a lot of things. Some just want to see stuff. They want to be able to see. They want to be able to use that data through a portal or look at, can I see trends? Does it affect my business positively? Can I use this as a tool to affect decision making for my business? None of these, I think, are unfair asks. And I think any service provider, however big, who isn't prepared to move to this and isn't prepared to move to whatever that demand is of the customer will die. They will wither and die on the vine. And I don't care if that's them with a B at the front, at the top of the shop. They'll go. They won't be here if they don't adapt. Now, I believe they are. I believe they're trying to. I do. I think they all are. I've had some conversations recently with a tier 2 provider, and I think they're really embracing it. So I think the times will change. I think once that confidence is re-earned, and let's be under no illusion, that is completely shattered, particularly in major companies and major government organisations. Confidence is shattered with massive MSPs. Once there is a feel of a confidence coming back the other way, that you're not trying to stifle us, that we do have flexibility to move, change, adapt, see our own stuff, our own configs, make changes, but also we have the freedom and the flexibility to move, i.e. you earn the right to be recontracted because you're great, not because we don't have any other option. It is changing. I think it's going to take absolutely years for the big guys to do it. I think they're trying. If the question was, do you think they'll succeed? No. I think smaller service providers and hybrid players are going to swoop in and disrupt the market and then lead it from the ground up.
And obviously, it goes without saying, to an extent, I guess we're hoping that we're one of those. Yeah. We're one of those players. We talk about this a little bit, but to what extent do you think, if we were to draw up a pros and cons going back to the build versus buy, on the build side, one of the pros would be we don't have to deal with these guys, these managed service providers that have perhaps treated us a little unfairly over the years. Or is it just a bit of a peripheral thing? Because we still see these big contracts being taken out by major public sector entities, private sector companies for 10 years, £100 million. To what extent are those issues, and what kind of time frame do you think we'll start seeing those behaviours change in public sector and the private sector?
Yeah, I think we should be, again, let's not pretend otherwise, that it's like a pendulum. It's swung from feeling that there's this horrendous lock-in to, hang on a minute, if we build it ourselves, we don't need these guys, so let's just get rid of them completely by building everything ourselves. That definitely drove a lot of those behaviours, and continues to as well. You don't just have the ability though to just build all your own stuff. So what we haven't seen is just every kind of major central government body or FTSE 100 company suddenly just have an in-house group of people go, right, that's fine, we don't like those guys anymore, we're just building everything, and the whole market just went, it didn't do that. And it won't do that. There are still a number of significant contracts being let. I think you will see less of them. I really do. the days of contracts that are 7 years and 10 years long just are going to be few and far between. You're going to know them because there's going to be 2 or 3 of them. There's going to be hardly anything. And I think part of that as well is, it's not just, looking with a service provider, you're talking 2 technology life cycles there. It's almost too risky to be with someone who you don't know where they could be. You need that flexibility to be able to move. So the question could still be, well, why are those bigger companies doing that? Why would they sign contracts like that, or even 5 years, or even 3 years now? Because there is still significant risk. You can't, the old adage, Rome wasn't built in a day. You just can't move there that quick. It will take time, and it's going to take capability, and it's going to take desire. Will we see the appropriate desire in public and private sector companies and bodies to do that? I suspect, I'm sure this will go down like a lead balloon. I think that the public sector is going to be decidedly slower in how it moves forward in not letting these contracts or letting them less frequently. I think the private sector is going to accelerate towards a hybrid future. It's just got a greater control, and it's not that they're even more capable. They have greater control and decision making. They don't have to worry about changes in government and all of those kind of things. I guess then the question would be, like, how long do you think it takes before this becomes more of the norm in the public sector? I think this sort of thing takes 10, 20 years to really, really change. I think it does. It's not going to happen overnight. But I do think the days of certainly the 10s and the 7s, I think you're going to see. In private sector, I don't think you'll see them awarded at all. In public sector, I think per year, 1, 2.
And of course, those are the ones that stand out, because there will be the ones where there's a big press release, and there will be the leader of some public sector entity standing next to someone important from one of these big telecommunications companies, and it will be front page news, so to speak. So they stand out. Of course, I know there's been a couple over the last few weeks. So in summary, then, I guess, and I'll give you the opportunity just to make sure I'm hearing and our viewers are hearing the same thing. Build versus buy, very much a worthy conversation to have. There are some pros and cons. I think we can tell from what you've said which way you lean, but I think the important thing to take away from this here is that everyone in the market, these organizations, need to ensure that the managed service providers, if that's the route you go down, are delivering an acceptable service, that they're meeting and exceeding an acceptable standard of service, which hasn't always been the case before.
Yeah, that would be my closing argument would be, I think when we're looking at build versus buy from a people perspective, so doing it internally versus having a service provider, hold to account and don't accept the world as it was. Recognize that you do have greater flexibility now to move and to change. Yes, there's still problems in some of the bigger entities, but it is what it is. Really drive that. Make sure that everyone understands and spell it out. This is what we want. From a technology point, coming back to that on the build versus buy, always buy it if it exists. Always buy it if it exists, and if not, really seriously consider what you're getting yourself into if you build it, and don't just think about what you're building today. Think about what it costs in time and money to be able to run and to look after, because it could become a significant part of your infrastructure for years to come.